والحمد لله رب العالمين المرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين صلوات على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salaamun Alaikum wa Rahmatullahi wa Barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين هم عن اللغو معرضون. The second quality of the successful mu'min or the successful mu'mineen is that they avoid lagh. Yesterday when we ended, we were basically discussing and opening up the fact that lagh means anything that's useless or wastes our time. And we tried to give tips on saying that yes, if our niyyah and our intention going into these actions is wasteful, it's just for entertainment purposes, just for passing time or killing time, then yes, it's a waste. And this is not a quality of a successful mu'min. However, there may be certain ways that we might be able to connect our niyyah and our actions back to Allah. And we gave some examples of how we can do this with, let's say, work, let's say, education. We talked about video games, movies, TV shows, spending time with family, all these kind of things. Some of which have been specifically mentioned in a hadith, right? Like spending time with family or doing work around the house or earning rizq and earning a halal living. But other things like, movies, TV shows, video games, things like this, we needed to put a bit more effort in there. One of the other meanings of lagh that has been mentioned in our narrations is lagh ya'ni ghina or al-ghina. So the topic of music is a very important topic. And usually when it's discussed, it's only discussed from one perspective, that music is haram and that's it. So what I'd like to do tonight, inshallah, is look at a few different things. Firstly, some of the traditions regarding al-ghina. The second is, what exactly are the fatawa regarding al-ghina, meaning music? Is it that all music is haram, or are the fatawa of our major maraja something a bit more precise and different? And then one of the major problems that many of us face, usually with the youth, that even with the fatawa, even if you tell them that music is haram or this kind of music is haram, then they still say, well, it doesn't affect me. I don't have a problem with it. So we also want to try to address that issue as well. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we have many, many different narrations in a hadith regarding the topic of al-ghina. So I want to go through just a few of them. And I'm going to use the word al-ghina on purpose instead of music. So I want you just to pay attention to these. I'm going to skip the Arabic, right? Just going through the general translations. For those of you who have read books like Greater Sins of Ayatollah Dastaghaib Shirazi, Rahmatullah alayh, there's a whole section, 2 sections actually, devoted to this idea of music and singing, or ghina. So the first type of narrations come specifically under the discussion of lagh, meaning when the ashab and the companions heard these verses, when lagh would be mentioned in the Quran, they would ask the imams, for example, or the Prophet, what exactly is lagh? So one of our types of narrations, you have the explanation. So they say lagh means music and singing. And they would continue, the true worshippers of Allah stay away from these kinds of things. Other type of narrations were not related to the specific verses of lagh, but talked about music and singing in general, right? So some of them, and these ones are attributed to the 6th Imam. It says that listening to music, songs, and other useless things and useless words cultivate and grow hypocrisy in the heart. in the same way that algae grows in water. And another narration attributed to the first Imam, he's reported to have said that singing and listening to music creates hypocrisy and causes poverty. There's also one narration which they say that the Prophet or Imam that it's attributed to is unknown. And some say that no, it's more likely it's coming from the Prophet. And it's where he's discussing many different signs of the end of times, right? Akhir al-Zaman. So he says that, mentioning all these different characteristics and traits, that, and also, you will see that ghina will be so prevalent that no one will dissuade others from listening to it, nor will they find the need to dissuade others to do so. So it's two parts here, right? It'll be so widespread in society that nobody will be able to dissuade one another. And more so that people won't even want to stop people from listening to music or ghina. And then he continues, and you shall see that music would be openly played even in the Haramain, even in the two sanctuaries, right? In Mecca and Medina. Now, I guess we could try to dissect this and open this up. Is this actually happening right now or not? I think the case is fairly clear. But regardless, if we take all these narrations as is, this idea of al-ghina, and we apply the translation which is typically applied, that ghina is music, then there's pretty much only one conclusion that we could reach. It's that music is haram, that's it. All music is haram. If we were to just look at these narrations, that's the conclusion that we would reach. And many of our past maraji' have reached the same exact conclusion. See, all music is haram. Now here's the issue. If all music is haram, now let's look at some of the ways and some of the cultural devices that we have in our community. So we can ask a question. If all music is haram, does that mean that the nohas, the poetry, the latmiyat, and all the things that we recite, the qasidas, all these things, do they become haram as well? Now usually when you say something like this, people usually very quickly emotionally respond that no way, that doesn't count. I'll say, that's not music. Like, okay. So on one hand, it says all music is haram. And we're saying, well, the poetry, maybe for certain individuals, a lot of this poetry, the things that we recite in Muharram, or sometimes even on these, these ayad and wiladat, they sound musical. So shouldn't that be haram too? And many will respond that no, it's not. And the reasoning is because it's not music. So we see right away, just as we saw yesterday in terms of something being useless, that it looks like the definition in our mind might be a little shaky, it might be a little gray, it might be unknown. So one of the first things we should understand is this. What exactly is music in the English definition by itself? Now, I don't want to go into music theory itself and break that down. But generally speaking, the way it's defined is that it's some sort of organized sound with some sort of rhythm, pitch, timbre, these types of qualities. If that's the case, then definitely, noha, matam, latmiya, qasidas, those are definitely music then. There's pitch, there's timbre, there's a specific frequency, there's melodies. We even it happens that if people are reciting, and they're doing matam to a specific poetry or noha, and somebody's off beat, then we kind of feel like, what's going on? Why can't people keep up the rhythm properly? So we feel like they're not doing this properly when they lose the beat, when they lose the rhythm, which means that there's a musical part of this. And if you lose it, then you're losing that emotional feeling behind it. Even think about things like reciting the adhan and the recitation of adhan or Quran or things like that. Sometimes we may find individuals who recite it very beautifully, right? Their recitation of the adhan really almost forces us, it forces our souls to come and offer salah. And then sometimes you have individuals who recite adhan with all the sincerity, but it's kind of like, it almost is like it pushes you away the other way, right? Because it doesn't really sound very nice, right? They're trying their best, but objectively you can say, as far as their ability to control the pitch and frequency, it's not very good, right? They jump around keys and this and that. Again, may Allah reward them for their intention, but sometimes you might say, maybe somebody else should recite that, right? And that's why even in Islamic countries, many Islamic countries, the mu'adhin, the person who recites it, that position is not something that's just given away to anybody. right? You have to be trained for something like that. To recite Quran in front of other individuals, you have to be trained for this. Or you have people who've been training from childhood to learn voice control. And the mu'adhin in classical Islamic texts is a paid position. From the Bayt wal-Mal, these people are paid for what they're doing. Now, typically we would say that for anybody paid to do their job, you would expect them to do a good job, right? So again, I'm not saying that we're in that position right now, but it's something to keep in mind. Obviously, we encourage children sometimes to come and recite the adhan, and we don't expect them to recite like, Abdul Basit or whatever, but it would be good if the individuals in the community, and I've seen certain centers do this, if they want to encourage children or everybody to recite poetry, recite adhan, recite Quran, well, have some training classes as well. It might be good. And usually in the communities, we have 1, 2, maybe 3 individuals who are trained, who know how to recite properly. And they can train the other community members on how to recite these things. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay, so now we have a problem. If we're saying that all music is haram, and based on the English definition of music, poetry, ma'tam, technically adhan recitation, Quran recitation, all of this is musical, then we know that can't be haram. So something's wrong here. So the problem wasn't in translating it as far as the English concept is concerned. It was going from the word al-ghina to an English translation. That's where we made the mistake. Saying that al-ghina means all music, that was our problem there. And that's exactly where we get into these issues. Now, over here, this is where we get into a slight difference between the maraji' and our ulama, and I don't want to break down every single fatwa and make this a complete fiqhi discussion. But just generally speaking, al-ghina typically means singing or songs, more so than it does music. Because music, you can have music meaning an instrumental, and it may not necessarily qualify as singing or as a song. Certain marajah say no, all sorts of ghina is actually music, but then they say, look, there's halal music and there's haram music, right? So they make a distinction there as well. And typically within our contemporary marajah, for example, Ayatollah Khamenei, Ayatollah Sistani, Ayatollah Nasir Makarim Shirazi, Ayatollah Wahid Khorasani, any of the contemporary marajah that are living, and even the ones from the past generations like Imam Khomeini, Ayatollah Khuwi, may Allah bless all of our marajah and bless all those who have passed away and protect those who are still living and give them a long life. For most of those scholars, it isn't all music that's haram. It isn't all ghina that's haram. Or if they say that it's all ghina, that means ghina means a very specific kind of sound. So that's what we have to discuss now. So what I want to explain just quickly is 2 of the different fatwa that are there from Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khamenei, so we have a better understanding. Now again, I can't go in depth because that would require a separate class and session. Just some general points for us to remember so that we don't end up saying that music itself is haram. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So first let's go with Ayatollah Sistani, hafidhahullah. So his definition is closer to the idea of songs. Not exactly, but it's closer to that idea. Now, the key criteria for what is haram music, or haram songs, or haram sounds, if you want to put it that way. The key 2 components there are lahw and la'ib. Now, again, even that, the problem is trying to translate that into English, right? Sometimes in books you'll see it'll say that the songs or the sounds which are suitable for entertaining and amusing gatherings, those are haram. Now, that's not exactly the best way to translate these things, right? Because carnival music, for example, that's an entertainment gathering. But we might say that it doesn't seem like that would be a haram gathering, right? So it's very, very tough for us to apply these kinds of rules based on the way that we understand these words of lahu and la'ib. So I don't want to use the words entertaining and amusing. Rather, I want to use this. If those gatherings, if a certain gathering, if the amusement there is a clearly type of haram amusement, it's a type of haram entertainment. So let's give a very easy example, right? Let's talk about a dance club. A very simple, easy to understand haram gathering, right? There's drinking, drugs, dancing, ikhtilat, and mix of genders. So it's an easy place to say, look, this is a mixed gender situation. It's clearly haram. Now, what type of music is specifically meant for that environment? So now, we basically have to refer back to the urf, your local custom and the local society. And you have to figure out what does your local community, your local society, your urf, determine as music or sounds specifically suitable for that type of haram place, like a club, right? A dance club or whatever. If it's suitable for that, then it becomes haram. Now, again, this requires a person to understand their urf. Because it may be the case that the same song that for us maybe here in Florida or America might be haram because we know it's suitable for those types of haram places. But because maybe those types of haram places don't exist, let's say in an Islamic country or Muslim country, that same song might be okay for them over there. So we have to make sure we understand our own local custom and urf. So this is basically an overview of Ayatollah Sistani's opinion. Now for Ayatollah Khamenei, it's a very similar type of idea, but there's a few other conditions that he brings along. He says, look, he wants to explain a bit more what do we mean by songs or music which is suitable for haram places. So he gives a few different types of criteria. He says, number one, and these are the obvious ones. This obvious one is, are the messages inside this music, with lyrics for example, are they things which are clearly anti-Islamic? Is the message within it anti-Islamic? Is it talking about not believing in God or religion being a joke? It's a simple example. If that's the case, then under Ayatollah Khamenei's fatwa, this would be haram to listen to. Another one. He says another thing is if it pushes you away from your religious practice itself. Does it lead you towards sin? So for me, maybe I'm listening to the song and it makes me move away from Allah. It makes me move away from Islam. It pushes me away from wanting to pray on time, for example. If that's the case, then this will also be haram according to his fatwa and his understanding. And the last one is that it specifically encourages haram stuff. Specifically, it's encouraging something haram. Right? If it literally is talking about doing drugs, right? Or let's say a mix of gender, or zina, or fornication, anything like that. If it's talking about this, then also this will fall under the same category. So it seems like, for example, Ayatollah Khamenei is a bit more concerned with the actual content, although it's not exactly the case. These are just some things that he offers. And Ayatollah Sistani emphasizes a bit more on how suitable that sound is for a type of gathering where that haram stuff takes place. So what usually people advise is that you kind of take a bit of both of these understandings, right? Again, you can refer to your own marja specifically, but these types of understandings we should figure out when we're applying this rule. Now some of you might say, look, I still don't know. I'm still in doubt. There might be certain types of music, you might say, I don't know if it's suitable for a haram gathering or not. I don't know. If you're unsure, and you've done your due diligence, then if you're unsure about it, then it's halal. Right? Because we have a principle in Islam that everything is halal until it's proven haram to you, generally speaking, right? So in this case, if you're unsure whether this applies and this becomes something haram or not, then it's okay, you're allowed to listen to it, right? Now we want to move on to the second part of the discussion, which is some people claiming that, look, I don't care about these fatwas, even if the content, the lyrics are bad lyrics, they're inappropriate. Even if it's suitable for a haram gathering, like it's club music. Well, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't make me do things which are haram. I listen to these things, but I still pray. I still fast. I still read the Quran. I don't have a problem. It doesn't seem like the music, this quote-unquote haram music, is actually affecting me. So now we want to address this issue. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So in order to reply to this issue, we have to discuss a bit more of the scientific and medical perspective. Now again, the same disclaimer I gave before. I'm obviously not a medical expert. I've done a bit of research into this. So for anyone here who does know better, please correct me right now if I make any mistakes. First thing we need to know is, forget music, let's talk about sound itself. Well, what is sound? Sound is simply vibrations which are being transmitted through the air, right? Typically transmitted as waves. Now these waves come and they hit our ears, right? They travel, they hit our ears. Our eardrums take these sounds and they transform them into electrical nerve impulses, which then get sent to our brains and get interpreted there, yeah? Okay. Now each sound has various different features. So for example, it'll differ in pitch, it'll differ in timbre, it'll differ in frequency, in volume, in key, and a few other different features. Based on the way that you take these different features and you combine them, it'll have different effects on our body, on our mind. Whether or not we want them to have the effect, they're going to have the effect. So this is kind of the first point we have to keep in mind. So let me give some very simple examples. If you want your child to go to sleep, you're trying to rock them to sleep, what do you usually sing to them? Right? You sing a lullaby. Now lullabies are specified by very specific types of tones, right? Very specific types of pitch, a very specific type of timbre and frequency, right? Like normally, like for, let's say the American lullabies, it's like, very soft, right? Nobody's like, go to sleep, baby, baby. You do that, then probably your child won't go to sleep. So every lullaby that you pick up is going to have a very specific kind of frequency. It's there to kind of lower their kind of defense mechanism and put them ready to, put them in a stage where they're ready to go to sleep. Nursery rhymes, for example, will have a very specific style of how they're recited. Ocean sounds. You know, people usually say that they feel this calmness and tranquility when they hear the sounds of an ocean. Nowadays, a lot of parents use pink noise or white noise machines, right, to help put their kids to sleep, because they say that that type of frequency, it almost shuts off certain neurological cognitive functions and switches them to sleep mode. Now, on the other side, sometimes you don't want to put people to sleep. You want to wake them up. So now when you have certain types of sounds or certain types of music, things like heavy metal. Now, I've never heard of anybody listening to heavy metal and trying to go to sleep. I don't think that's ever happened. Or, for example, the specific frequency that car alarms are tuned to, or the alarm on your phone. Those alarms are set to a very specific frequency because the body, the mind, has no choice but to become alert because of it. And that's why some people, when they put on, let's say, ocean sounds as their alarm, they don't actually want to wake up because of it, right? Because it's a very calming sound. And I know some people who, let's say, put on Quran as their alarm. And there's a reason that they're snoozing it, because it's not meant to wake them up. And even in the discussion about how to recite adhan or iqama or your Quran, right? The different types of tajweed, the different types of recitation styles. Even there, they discuss there, the scholars of tajweed, if you want to make the mukhatabin, those who are listening, if you want them to become energized, recite it in this style. If you're trying to make them more emotional and maybe bring out a state of sadness, there's this style you have to recite. And there's this video that was shared, I think, a few weeks ago of the famous mu'adhin, I think in Turkey, right, who is going through these different styles of adhan. It was very, very beautiful, right? And every different style that he went through, it changes the way that you feel. So what are the points here? The points here are this. Number one, that whether or not we like it, based on this combination of pitch and timbre and frequency and volume and all this, it'll have an effect on our body. It's involuntary. We have no choice. And that's why specifically, those who are designing sounds or music try to design specific types of sounds to make us react in a very specific way. A car alarm is meant to wake us up, whereas a lullaby is meant to help us calm down and go to sleep. Now, I don't know if I want to really go into the kind of medical parts of it, but again, maybe I'll just allude to some ideas. So all of this goes back to our nervous system. And specifically, the medical research says that sounds or music affects our ANS, our autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, is comprised of two different parts. One is your SNS, your sympathetic nervous system, and the other is your PNS, which is your parasympathetic nervous system. So both of these systems together, they control different things. They control your heart, your digestion, your respiratory rate, even your salivation, perspiration, pupil dilation, and even urination. There's even, and as we'll go into it, there's even a way that if your nervous system is tuned a certain way, it might even cause you to go to the bathroom, right? Even sometimes, it's kind of like an urban myth, they say there's a sound called the brown noise or the brown sound. I'm not going to describe what that is. I'll let you figure out what that means. So let's go back. So we have two different types within the ANS. You have sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system, they say, is your basically emergency survival system, right? It's there to increase your heart rate, to pump up, and it reacts to adrenaline rushes, right? It's increasing your breathing. That's the effect there. The parasympathetic is more about, it's the opposite obviously, right? It's your resting system. It's there to calm you down and to decrease your adrenaline, decrease your heart rate, and slow down your breathing. So obviously, your parasympathetic, that's what you're going to want to activate to go to sleep. And your sympathetic is what you're going to want to activate if you need to wake up in the morning, get to work, if something happens and you need to be alert. Now, the body at all times wants something called homeostasis. It wants to be in balance, right? We don't want to be too hyped up, nor do we want to seem like we're passing out all the time, right? We want to make sure we have a good amount of energy. When we're ready to wake up, then the body will increase one side. When we're ready to go to sleep, the body will adjust to the other side. But generally speaking, we are going to want to stay in this balance and this homeostasis. So the issue here is that generally speaking, a lot of the medical research shows that music itself stimulates our SNS, the sympathetic one, the one that increases heart rate, the one that increases adrenaline, the one that kind of pushes us into that flight or fight mode. And they say that what happens, according to many studies, that this increase, the music that is stimulating our sympathetic nervous system, causes a lot of different disorders in the body, a lot of nervous system disorders. And the more warm that our SNS becomes, the more harm that it can do. So I'm just going to list out a few of the things that certain medical literature has indicated upon. It says that certain types of music can increase and cause high blood pressure, hypotension, insomnia, anger and rage, diabetes, Parkinson's, headache, troubled breathing and swallowing, memory loss, mental disorders like mania, depression, random laughter, and nonsensical speech. We also know, from what we've seen through WikiLeaks reports and things like that, and in the mainstream media, and the alternative media, that in places like Guantanamo Bay, and places where innocent individuals are being tortured, music is used as a form of torture. They play specific types of songs, specific types of music in order to torture those individuals who are there. So it's interesting that some people say that, I'm not affected by it. At the same time, we have a whole science and a whole team of medical experts saying that there's a lot of medical issues you'll face when you listen to certain types of music. So now the question is this: when you say it doesn't affect me, say, look, do you have control over your nervous system? It's clearly not the case. Nobody can control their own nervous system. Nobody would ever make that argument. So why do we feel that we can listen to whatever we want and not be affected? Now this we can also extend to other ideas, even the idea of swearing and cursing. Because some people will extend that, or ghibat, right, backbiting. Can we extend the argument and say, look, there are certain sounds or sound waves that might have an effect on our nervous system without us knowing? Or more so, what about our spiritual system? How do we know what things are actually affecting our soul or our spirit? Now, if we understand these principles properly, then we could be a bit more humble when we come to discussing what types of sounds and music will affect our soul or not, and maybe we'll engage in a bit more precaution when we entertain these discussions. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.